the reason I'm so excited is because I've been hearing a lot of hoopla about a protocol that might actually work for women in my situation. And so I actually met this doctor and attended one of his webinars. And he was talking about how protocol matters and how sometimes the conventional approach, which is what I used before, may not be the most effective. Because I also realized when I was doing my IUIs that I actually produced more eggs. It wasn't a lot of eggs, but at least I produced two size mature follicles every time, close in size, with that protocol. Even though the IUI didn't work, but the protocol in terms of producing the eggs worked. So I've woken up today really excited. So I am going to learn as much as I can about it, look as much as I can about it, and figure out if that's what I'm going to do. So I'm telling you. So I'm going to probably share with you a video of what kind of convinced me that maybe the type of doctor who specializes in what it is that you're trying to look for might probably be the best way to go, especially before you consider doing donor eggs. So, yeah.
I'm Dr. Frank Young.
Hi, I'm Dr. Edward Duran.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lee Powell.
So today we'll talk about the diminished ovarian reserve. How to study with Dr. Duran?
Well, diminished ovarian reserve is a term that's been used of late to describe patients that have a low quantity of eggs. And it's often correlated with age, so that patients as they get older, they tend to be labeled as having diminished ovarian reserve. The way the diagnosis is made is primarily through hormone blood testing. So there's the FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone, which is tested along with estrogen to give an idea of diminished ovarian reserve. There's also anti-Mullerian hormone, which gives us an idea of diminished ovarian reserve. Together with an ultrasound, which gives us a good picture of the follicles that contain the eggs in the ovaries, we get a good picture of what the patient's egg production potential is. Dr. Cal, what's your thoughts on diminished ovarian reserve?
Well, as I usually sort of describe for patients, you want to think about ovarian reserves just like how much more gas you have, left in your car's, gas tank. Usually there's some mechanism of gauging it. It's not very accurate, but it gives a general estimate, which is a good prediction. And like what Dr. Duran, you just pointed out, usually there are three things we use. One is at the FSH level, one will be the AMH level, and the other, of course, will be visually by ultrasound estimation.
Severity of diminished ovarian reserve. Some of just mild reduced of ovarian reserve, and some of more severe diminished ovarian reserve. For those two different category of patients, and at the Live IVF Center, how we help those women to, in terms of produce, either using the methodology to produce the follicle and the freeze egg, or using the IVF monitoring, and then to help them bank some embryos. What kind of protocol would you guys using?
So, what's important to understand is that patients that have diminished ovarian reserve, in general, are going to have elevated FSHs. So since they have elevated FSHs, their pituitary is already sending the follicle stimulating hormone to the ovary, and all the receptors are saturated. So the ovary is getting as much gas, let's say, from follicle stimulating hormone as it's going to get. So giving them fertility medication in the form of gonadotropins, FSH, is not effective. So that's the first thing to understand. Secondly, we have strategies where by giving them estrogen, knowing that estrogen will lower the FSH level in the pituitary gland, we can artificially suppress the FSH level that, especially in women that are under 45, may allow a follicle or two to start to develop. And by keeping the FSH level down and giving them that estrogen, all it takes is monitoring, which we do, every 4 to 7 days to see how the follicle's progressing, and you have to be patient. You can't pull the plug after 7 days and say you're not going to grow an egg. You have to be patient, and we are very successful at these patients to have them to tease the ovary to grow an egg. So those, what I just illustrated would be someone that has a very high FSH, what we would call a severe diminished ovarian reserve, or someone that's even on the verge of menopause. For other patients that have mildly elevated FSHs, those are patients that can be treated with medication like Clomid or Letrozole to try to have them produce more eggs. Giving them FSH typically isn't helpful, but giving them medication like Clomid or Letrozole can help them, often produce 3 to 5 eggs, which is great for their situation, because that's probably as many or more than they would have produced on the maximum dose of fertility drugs. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. Other than the FSH, right, several years ago, one of the big groups published this, predictive model, let's put it that way. They were saying that based on their experience, if someone's baseline FSH is above 19, basically her chance of using conventional IVF becoming pregnant is 0. If they're above like 15, then it's very, very minimal. And I'm sure, we have a lot more experience, in those people who have achieved success. Other than FSH, coming back to AMH, the literature in the past has suggested if someone whose AMH is under 2, right, the review suggestion that if they were going through conventional IVF, they probably will retrieve no more than 6 oocytes, and whose AMH is under 1, and they probably will have no more than 4 oocytes. So that again, shows that, just like earlier what you said, these people, their ovaries either have limit or their receptors are saturated, so conventional IVF most likely is not going to do well. And the most recent review just came out a couple months ago. It certainly, corresponds with that.
Yeah, we see so many patients have so-called diminished ovarian reserve, like when you say FSH level above 20 and or AMH level below 1. And I see so many patients that was recommended by their IEI doctor to suggest them using donor egg. So often I feel so bad for those patients because I believe many of them really don't necessarily to using donor egg. And I see those patients choosing donor egg or by their doctor's recommendation prematurely. So I just give you one example.
Yes.
And recently we had a patient.
Go, Dr. Yillian.
So she's a 40 years old woman, and her average level was very big, between 20 to 24, and her AMH level was 0.01. So her doctor in UK would suggest her using donor egg. So when she came to us and we did a natural cycle IVF for her because her FSH level are high, as you pointed correctly, we don't have to give them medication because all the fertility drug will raise her FSH level. So her FSH level already high. You cannot give FSH level even further. So the patient was choosing natural cycle IVF, and we finished 3 natural cycle IVF for this patient, and we actually get 3 eggs, made 3 embryos, and 2 of these 3 embryos passed PGS test.
Oh my
And
God.
the first embryo transfer results pregnancy. So this is just one typical example. So if with this patient, if she came in and we using conventional IVF and give her the Ghana F 300 and the menopause 150, and I think her F should be raised to about 45 or 50. So then I think this patient have no chance follicle will grow. So sometimes I always give example and use medication to promoting follicle growth. It's just almost like a growing flower give fertilizer. Not always the more the better. So if you put too much fertilizer there, and the flower will be burned. That's a very similar concept.
And